Good Wednesday to you again, everybody in Com 731. Welcome to week 11's review of week 10. That is this week, what you did last week, okay? Take a look at the questions, your answers. We try to add any additional material to help round this out. A couple quick notes by way of assignments. This is a week I gave you just a wee bit of an extension on the technology tool. You need to have had that done and have that in. If there was any delay, if you haven't gotten in touch with me already, you need to have that. You need to get in touch with me, and you need to make sure that you have that in. And also, during this week, as we're now winding up and getting ready for sort of the downside of the semester, make sure that you are preparing your second part of the paper. That is, the finishing up of your paper. Okay. And I will, I don't know that I'm going to say a whole lot more about it. I hope what you need to do is fairly well, laid out. See, I am clearly not sufficiently caffeinated. Let's do that again. Fairly well laid out in the assignment sheet. All right. But if you have any questions, please ask me. Okay. And in fact, I'm looking at okay, so we have extended to the 5th. All right, I was going to say, I'm looking at the assignment turn in the technology tool, and I see a number of them still pending, but you've got just a couple more days instead of the 29th into the 5th. So some of you have gotten them in already. Some of you are still pending, but make sure that you get that done and in. Okay. And if you do have questions about the second part of the paper, make sure that you talk to me. Okay, let's take a look at the questions from last week. Now, if you watch the other video before we get into the questions from last week, you'll know that the questions this week, that what we're after is, and not a definitive, but a partial juxtaposition of some research against what we've read in Cohen and Schmidt. All right. It's not the research is not everywhere and anywhere, but it's a particular somewheres with a particular outcome. So, pay attention to that. Okay. But let's take a look at the questions that you did when you were wrapping it up last week. Okay. Question number 1. Do you agree that social media are substantively changing the nature of revolutions both at home and abroad? Please support your answer with a link to some academic research. Okay, Charles, Chuck, let's take a look at you. Good afternoon, everybody. Social media is having a substantial impact on changing the face of revolutions at home and abroad. Revolution may start as a mass movement to become effective. Some sort of central authority must emerge. A core leadership group develops on the ground and takes physical risks, and their virtual supporters cannot or will not. This is, you're quoting from Cohen and Schmidt. Social media is a tool that acts as both an accelerant and a means of coordinating the efforts of revolutions and their followers and sympathizers. I agree with you, Chuck. Now, the question becomes, of course, are central authorities using the same tools to counter revolutions? So what we may not be seeing is a tipping of the scales. Okay, Alicia, let's see what you say. Social media has already changed many in which we operate, many ways, I think you mean, which we operate in society, and there's no doubt that it will continue to change. This includes changing the nature of revolution. According to Schmidt and Cohen, every society in the future, including those that adopt internet technologies early on, will experience different forms of protest in which communication technology is used to organize, mobilize, and engage international communities. The platform protesters use today, Facebook, Twitter, etc., will morph into even more constructive vehicles as developers around the world find new ways to utilize video, etc., etc. Okay, now remember, and we're not picking on you here, Lisa. This is predictive on the part of these two authors. Is this evidence-based? Well, so this may or may not pan out. That is, that it will change the face of revolution. In terms of war and internal conflict, I think an interesting evidence-based scenario is now playing out first with the war in Ukraine between Ukraine and Russia, and now between the war between the state of Israel and the Gaza Strip and the terrorist organization Hamas. And so if this is an area that interests you, watch those conflicts, because there's all kinds of material to be studied and for further research and even dissertation. Okay, question number 2. Stopping terrorism has been a primary strategic goal of U.S. foreign policy based on Chapter 5. What is the U.S. doing poorly and what is it doing well regarding the use of new technology to stop terrorism? Candace, let's see what you're up to here. Chapter 5, Schmidt and Cohen, they discuss future terrorism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One example that Schmidt and Cohen provide is that the U.S. has done well in using technology to stop terrorism is partnering with hackers to combat terrorists, enacting cyber warfare. Okay. And by the way, if this is an area that interests you, there's a great series out there. It's a podcast series called Dark Net Diaries. And it's by a guy who calls himself Jack Reciter, which I think is a nom de plume. It's a stage name. I can't prove it, but I have the strongest suspicion. There's some really, really interesting stories in that series about this hacking and cyber warfare and cyber terrorism. Okay. Take a look at that. Dark Net, N-E-T, Dark Net Diaries. Back to you, Candace. More specifically, they explain that the agencies like the Pentagon's Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, or DARPA, National Security Agency, NSA, have recruited talented individuals at venues like computer security conferences, series Black Hats and Hackers Convention at DEF CON. Okay, so seeing what they can do. Alternatively, Schmidt and Cohen also provide some examples of how the U.S. could improve, how it uses technology to stop terrorism. For instance, Schmidt and Cohen describe how, after 9/11 terrorist attacks, the Defense Department set up an information awareness office and greenlit the development of a program called Total Information Awareness, TIA, a program that would help detect terrorist activities by collecting an aggregate of all transactional data. Unfortunately, the public did not like the idea of their data being collected in this way, and therefore the program shut down. Okay, interesting point, Candace, because we live in a system in which you have a presumption of innocence before proven guilty, and our system is designed to favor an outcome in which the guilty go free rather than the innocent be imprisoned. And so given that, can you design a system that goes around, vacuums up massive amounts of data, in which and amongst with is mostly data of innocent citizens? Okay. I mean, on a personal level, I am not for these mass vacuuming, and they usually dress it up with language like, oh, don't worry, it's just metadata. It's data about the data. Yeah, no, that's data. Because if there wasn't a useful application to identify would-be terrorists in metadata, you wouldn't be collecting the metadata. And although this is not related to digital space, it's more on the organizational side of this class. I still find it peculiar that when you step into certain spaces that there are constitutional rights that are immediately suspended. The airport is one of them. Why, when, how? And please don't send me emails or comments going, but Mr. Gardner, it's because terrorists. I understand that. But how is it that the instance that I step into a space, my Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable search and seizure disappears? An unreasonable search means you just go through my stuff because I'm there or you're there. So you just pull my car over and you go, well, since I pulled you over, I'm going to go through your car. No, you're not. Because under my Fourth Amendment right, you don't have a right to do that. Or because I'm at your door, I'm some sort of a law enforcement official, I'm going to go through your house. No, you're not. Okay. So how is it that we find ourselves in a place in which if I'm in a space, then that the right that I have to say you're not going through my stuff is gone? Very weird. Okay. And this is from someone who does a lot of travel. All right. Question number 3. Schmidt and Cohen suggests that cyber warfare will overtake conventional warfare. Do you agree? Again, Chuck, cyber warfare will increasingly be important warfare component, but will only partially displace conventional warfare. Resources, trained soldiers and armies, and strategies that Napoleon would be familiar with would still be principal means to use in conflicts by states, rebels, terrorists. Looking back to an earlier chapter of the author state, it is the people who make or break revolutions, not the tools they use. And that's an excellent point. So and you are correct, because look, the purpose of when we say warfare, the purpose of warfare is to break the resistance of the enemy and then take something from the enemy, either their capacity to fight, their willingness to fight, and or the resources by which they fight you. If the goal of an adversary is just to terrify you, that's not warfare, that's terrorism. So to achieve those other objectives, you have to have physical persons occupying physical spaces, and that's not being done in a cyber environment. Okay, so the one still is going to go with the other. Okay, question number 4. In your opinion, but drawing on your readings this week, does new media technology help or hinder conflict resolution? Cheryl, given that Schmidt and Cohen wrote New Digital Age 9 years ago, and with what we know of technology today, in my opinion, I feel as a new media technology will help with conflict resolution. I found this interesting, Cheryl. And Cheryl, I've had Cheryl in a number of classes. We've gotten a chance to get to know each other. I don't know that I entirely agree, but that's okay. You have the floor. If used for the greater good, communication technology and the speed, and I'm gonna put a tab in that if used for the greater good part of your answer. So we'll come back to that. Communication technology and the speed of telecommunication networks will play a crucial role in recovering from either man-made or natural disasters. Okay, but this isn't what we're talking about here. We're talking about conflict resolution. Based on our readings, new media technology will help not only in developing and recovering from unexpected, in some cases expected, but it will enable the ability to help across the globe. For example, better networking capabilities enable humanitarian efforts such as USAID and Samaritan's Purse or others. Schmidt and Cohen add that citizens reporting through mobile platforms can strengthen the state's ability to maintain security, work together, and provide a second set excuse me, of vigilante to help build a safer, honest society. However, if using news media to taunt and persuade action, as we saw in the use of technology to amplify terrorist activity, then it can only hinder conflict resolution. Based on our readings, how social media platforms can offer virtual space to air grievances. Okay, very interesting answer. But I think, Cheryl, the key phrase that you got here is if used for the greater good. Remember, everyone, communication technologies are value neutral. It often happens that those who create them and promote them and sell them and profit from them will pitch them as value positive. And if you look at the history of communication, this has been attached to all communication revolutions. Within our time period, it starts with, say, the telegraph. And no, we weren't alive in the 19th century, but I'm talking about relevant to our electronic media environment. And the pitch was, this will connect the nation. It'll provide like a nervous system. There's all sorts of anthropomorphic examples given for what the telegraph was going to do. And it was pitched that way to receive money to put up telegraph poles. All right. But it's highly contextual, because if you were amongst peoples living on the Great Plains, and you had been living there for thousands of years, the coming of the telegraph, which provided a means by which information was transferred at literally the speed of light, because it was, being moved along by electricity, and therefore information about how to accelerate the construction of railroads, where precious minerals had been discovered, where the good grass was that season. None of this was good for you, because that meant a flood of peoples faster into places that you depended on for your seasonal existence. You know, they got there faster than you could. In fact, there's a movie right now, Leonardo DiCaprio in The Killing the Flower Moon, The People of the Flower Moon. Did I get that right? Based on a book. And it tells the story of the Osage and the oil boom, and I think it's who's I'm trying to the author. It's Killers of the Flower Moon. David Grant. Okay. Well, back to the opening of the Oklahoma Territory. All right, there were agreements in place with indigenous peoples who were put there that gave them land, and then those agreements were revised without their consent. They're sort of pushed out, and it was telegraphed out that there was going to be land available. There were some people who got access to that information sooner than others, and they showed up and they got out there faster than everybody else was able to, and they called them Sooners, hence Oklahoma Sooners, if you ever wonder where that name came from. All right, so technology is value neutral. So be careful. I'm not, Cheryl, this isn't taking anything away from your answer, but be careful about those that pitch it. And they're usually the ones who produce it and profit from it. And I'm not saying profit is bad. That's not my point. Okay. This is a communications caveat. All right. That how it's used, that's entirely dependent on context. Okay. That's the 4 questions. I hope you enjoyed the book. I think it's an important one. I don't agree with everything that the author's doing in there, but that's not the point. That is, we need to take a look at these big pictures and these theories that are being developed and say, and so I hope that you will enjoy the juxtaposition of at least a very small slice of research, the small place and the small time that I did weighed against the predictive elements of the book New Digital Age. Okay. All right, everybody. Have a terrific rest of the week. Continue to work on your papers. Finish up your technology tools and get those in. I will see you on Canvas. Almost said Blackboard. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.